This episode is presented by Recovery Centers of Montana.
If you or someone you know is struggling, getting help shouldn't feel out of reach.
Recovery Centers of Montana offers care across 6 locations, including inpatient facilities and outpatient clinics.
Step away from the noise and focus on getting your life back on track.
Learn more by calling 701-401-3000.
That's 701-401-3000.
The North Dakota oil and natural gas industry works here, and works here, and here, and even works here by creating 60,000 jobs statewide and generating billions of tax dollars annually to support our infrastructure, flood protection projects, and our schools. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities.
Learn more at ndpetroleumfoundation.org.
Hi, I'm Megan Invick with Americans for Prosperity, North Dakota. One of the cornerstones of our Road to Opportunity agenda is tax relief, because North Dakotans deserve to keep more of what they earn. That's why we're advocating for the elimination of the state income tax, along with meaningful property tax relief tied to responsible local spending. Learn more about the Road to Opportunity and our plan to eliminate the state income tax at afpnd.org.
Today's program is sponsored by the North Dakota Association of Rural Electric Cooperatives, representing locally owned electric co-ops that power homes, farms, and businesses across rural North Dakota. Electric cooperatives are committed to reliable, affordable energy and strengthening the communities they serve. Learn more at ndarec.com. You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? This episode of Plain Talk is going to be another one of those where the Attorney General yells at me the whole time. Not really. He only yells at me when he calls me on the phone. And
that's not true.
I am being mean. I am being mean to our Attorney General. We just got a crime report out, and it was a pretty good report. I think it's something that we can be happy about situationally. I'm looking at just some of the summary. Total Group A offenses. Group A is the most serious crimes, I think you could say. Down 7.4%. Now that's down in total number, not adjusted for population. Crimes against persons down 3%. Crimes against property, that's burglary, theft, things like that, down 12.2%. Crimes against society, that's drug violations, weapon violations, down 3.2%. Total statewide arrests down 3.7%. When it comes to the crime rate drop, total Group A crime per 1,000 population. So if we adjust it for population, down 7.8%. Murders down 26%, but that's a little misleading. We have a very small number of murders, so we're talking about going 19 down to 14, but 5 less murders. We'll take it. Burglary down 25%. Aggravated assault down 6.6%. Drew, that's a good report, right?
Yeah, I think there's some, as I said the other day, we had a media conference about it, and we said there's certainly stuff in there that we're pleased to see, and then there's some things stick out, and you look at it and think you can't even believe it. 5 straight years of DUIs going up after really a long period.
Let's drill down on that. Why do you think that's happening?
I wish that I knew, because I think that so many people feel, and I have no reason to question them on this, that the 24/7 program that came into being some years back, not 27, I can't remember the exact year, but it really led to some serious declines. It had much stiffer penalties. There were some mandatory jail times included. Importantly, there was credible monitoring of people after they were arrested, and accountability measures that were easy to determine if they were being followed. And you had a lot of years with decline, and then here 5 years ago, it starts edging its way back up. I don't have an answer for that. I asked the other day. I said I'm not expert in that, but I can promise people that the platform of our office to join with good ideas about how do you reverse that. I feel like the public messaging on driving while intoxicated is pretty good. I feel like, so many people, there's so many options available to you, but I don't even like to cite that because you shouldn't have to have Uber, Lyft, and taxi systems as an offset. But let's face it, they're practical and they're helpful. And yet here we are.
Drew,
It's
is it possible we're just catching more people?
It is. Yeah, Chad, that is possible. And I hope that that's it, because you want to say that, there's good enforcement around the state. And I would hope that that's it. It's a great, I hope that's it. I'll leave it at that. But it's something that has to be looked at because it's such an avoidable crime.
We should, I should have, and I didn't expect us maybe to talk about the DUI incidents, but I mean, to me, obviously arrests are a number, but I also like to look at how many alcohol related crashes are we having? How many people are being hurt or dying in those crashes?
Yeah.
How much property damage is there?
Yeah.
If we look at those data, I mean, if those things are going down, then maybe we're just catching more people, and maybe that's a good thing. But it is odd because it is my instinct right that when it comes to DUIs, I don't want to say that people who maybe get one aren't a problem, because you shouldn't get any, but is it that the bulk of the problem are like repeat offenders, like really problem drinkers?
It's you just hear that anecdotally, but there's not good data that I've been presented with that. And I would venture to say that there's got to be some component of it. It's a crime. You hear so many people say, "Well, but for the grace of God, go I," and people can say, "Well, I've hopped in my vehicle and I've done that." And again, that's part of the public information campaign on all of this over the decades too, and I think that people have responded pretty well to it. It bears some more attention though, and I know the legislature, the last time they did some work on this was after there was a family tragically killed by a drunk driver outside of West Fargo, I think it was, and they the legislature put in some more mandatory sentences for those crimes. And so stiffen those penalties, but then also people are always tinkering with looking at the 24/7 program, the accountability measures, things they can do to get people to really straighten up, even after just a single arrest for DUI. Because every time someone gets into a vehicle impaired, they are at risk to the entire population within driving range of them and everybody in their vehicle as well. It's completely avoidable.
So, Drew, we should mention you're doing this interview from an airport.
Yeah.
So if people see your background isn't the normal office space, it's because
Drew is literally sitting along one of the concourses. He just sat down with his phone and
I'm kind of a spectacle, judging by all the people staring at me as they go by, and a couple of people. It's just
so thank you for doing this. But
glad to.
Looking at the report, I mean, Rob went through all the numbers that went down. You do that per capita, the numbers are down even more. You're the top law enforcement person in the state. Why wasn't your press conference yesterday a celebration? Isn't this sort of, you should take some credit for, hey, we're doing a pretty good job moving these numbers in the right direction. The press sort of came through as maybe it wasn't as celebratory as maybe the numbers would appear. What would you say to that?
I appreciate the question, and I, as I said at the press conference, that there was a lot to read through and see that there were some things that were less alarming than they've been in the past. There were some that were confounding, and that was the DUI picture. That's just confounding to me. And then some that were confirming. And the confirming was when you look at these matters in context, and I would strongly urge your listeners to go look at the crime report on the AG's office website and look at what was an unbroken string of 10 straight years of violent crimes committed by a human being against another human being, going up, 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 up every year for 10 years. And now you've had 5 years where they have sort of grouped at a plateau. You fellas pointed that out last year, and you weren't wrong. You said it's sort of plateaued. It has plateaued at an astronomically high number. You're talking 4,000 more victims of violent crime every year in North Dakota than was the case 10, 12 years ago. Interestingly, in the middle of all of that, after some years going up, the state got talked into making some quote unquote reforms. Now, as I'll be talking about in the weeks and months ahead, these are reforms. These aren't brand new. These have been tried all over the country. You can ask national experts about this. They've been discredited everywhere. They don't work, and they're not working here. So that makes me, I look at that in the full context and say, coming down a little bit, but yet still being on a plateau for 5 years off astronomical climbs is not something to be celebrated. And I think we got to look at that and say, forms, whatever you want to call them, were put in place. It continued to skyrocket for about 5 years after that. And now it's plateauing. There's an enormous amount of work to do. There's work to be celebrated in here and to be happy about. We still live in our state we're blessed with so much. We know that, but also people recognize, and they're right. Violent crime and drug trafficking. These are still very, very significant problems in our state. And the violent crime issue was one of the last decade. It was created and it was tolerated. It is, I would say to them, when you look at the charts overall, it is unabated. We're plateauing 5 straight years after going up for 10.
Obviously, this is in the context of a long-running debate over what you call truth in sentencing, which is essentially requiring that people who are convicted of some of these serious crimes serve more of what they're sentenced to. Your accusation is that DOCR allows them out. The Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation are letting them out too early. One thing is that when we looked at,
I would just interject.
Sure.
It's not an accusation. It's documented. It's true. Just because they deny it all the time, we document it. We've got volumes of cases.
Well,
where
I don't. Yeah,
sentence. Okay,
we certainly have. I do not dispute that DOCR that we have policies in place that allows DOCR to put people who have been convicted of crimes back out based on any number of factors. So we don't dispute there. You would like that to happen less often, essentially. I think that's a fair way of putting it. One thing that you really drilled down on is crimes against persons, which is murder, assaults like simple assault, aggravated assault, rapes, and manslaughter.
Sexual assaults,
Sexual assaults, right? And so when I look at those numbers, murders obviously, I mean, we have so few, it's really hard. I would say they've been flat for a long time. It goes up a little, it goes down a little.
Yeah.
We just don't have a
right.
lot. We just don't have a lot in the state to begin with.
Right.
The big categories are sexual assault, but even more so, the simple assaults and the aggravated assaults. Those ones are the category. Not only are those most of the infractions in that category, they're also showing the most growth. It seems to me that's the problem area. Do you agree?
They're a significant problem area, yes. Interestingly, DOCR says simple assaults aren't an assault. They aren't violent. They don't put them in their violent crime statistics. And when they compare them to ours and they say, oh gosh, we don't know what the AG is talking about with violent crime going up. And then when you finally extract it from their tight grips, they don't count simple assault as violent crime. They don't count whole swaths of aggravated assaults as violent crimes. They have whole swaths of sexual assaults that they take out of the violent crimes. We had this conversation, I think, 1 or 2 interviews ago about just having fair terms, transparency. Ours is very clear. We listed in our report. It's all the crimes committed by a human being against the person of another. It's very simple and straightforward. And so DOCR coming in for as long as they did, though, and saying things like, oh, well, the numbers are actually much flatter than that, and going on and on and on and on. It took us, I think, 2 years, I'll call myself slow, to finally get out of them the list of where were they getting their numbers? They were trying to discredit our numbers. We get our numbers from every sheriff's office, every police department. It's a highly regulated process. It's apples to apples every year. Yeah. Let me tell you something. The proposal going forward, this is not the same we've done in the past. I've gone to a couple different groups, and I'm declaring this the Drew Wrigley surrenders. I lost. They don't want to have long mandatory sentences. They don't want to extend existing sentences. And so Drew Wrigley lost that battle. Here's what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the scandal of a judge's sentence in North Dakota being routinely disregarded. It means nothing. They are a co-equal branch of government with the constitutional and legal responsibility of passing sentences. 95% of the time, those are agreed to by the defense and the prosecution, and the defendant laughs as he walks out of the courtroom because he knows or she knows they're not serving a fraction of that. We've documented this, and we've got extensive materials on this. It is scandalous. They don't even keep track of the number of crimes committed by people that they let out early And they look at legislators kind of like, well, it'll take a while. I remember one of the senators asked, well, how long would it take you to get us that data? It seems important, doesn't it? They said, well, we think about 10 years we could get together a data set. That's ridiculous. Honestly, that's ridiculous.
So Drew,
So we got to do better. That's the truth in sentencing piece. Sorry, Chad, I'll just finish this up. The truth in sentencing is we're not asking for longer sentences. We're not asking for mandatory sentences. 0. I've made that pledge. We're not going to ask for 0 this time around. Just saying sentences matter when they get passed. Defendants, as they do all over the country in so many states, including our liberal neighbor to the east, Minnesota, they have got to serve 66% of a sentence that a judge passes because that judge has made a reasoned conclusion about on this person's record in the facts of this case and everything else involved, the arguments of counsel and defense counsel and prosecution. This is the sentence that I'm going to pass. It's got to mean something.
Drew, to quote the great Yogi Berra, this does feel like deja vu all over again, listening to this conversation. I'm going to use another saying. There's 3 kinds of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics. I looking at your numbers and they're plateaued over the last 5 years. Yeah, but per capita, it's gone down, right? I mean, we're talking about a 6% population increase over the last 10 years.
It's actually tracked. They've tracked pretty closely. The crime rate and the number of crimes, we control for that, and we look at that. Those track pretty similarly.
So I don't understand the politics of this conversation we're having right now. To come on the podcast again, just like we did 2 years ago, and attack the Department of Corrections and basically say they're liars and you can't trust them and they're whatever. How does that move? If you're saying surrender, you may be changing a little bit of your policy, but you ain't changing your tactics much. And I think the tactics are part of the problem. So it sounds like we're just going to have another food fight if this is the way the conversation is starting.
Well, no, it starts off from the well-documented prevarications of the DOCR. We brought this out. And now what we're accumulating are statements made by them in legislative hearings, in response to email exchanges, and they're just not transparent. Now, for some reason, this area alone, some people have concluded they're not worried about people who aren't going to be transparent or be accountable. They have no objectively verifiable accountability measures. As we dig into what they're doing, they're not transparent about what they do. And you're talking about issues of matters of life and death and public safety. You're dealing with very violent criminals and serious drug traffickers and sex offenders. And what's going on over there is problematic. Now, I've been turning over these documents over the last several years. We turn them over. I give them to the DOCR. I give them to whomever and say, let us know where our information is not accurate, where we say you've let somebody out at 7% of a sentence that was passed or that they probably agreed to in their plea agreement. And they're serving a fraction of them. Then they go out and then they reoffend. And then all these other things happen where we've made these instances. Bring them back. Let me know. And I will use my same platform to apologize. I'll correct the record publicly. I'm still waiting. I've never, when you say it's a food fight, an argument back and forth, it's like, no. They've very successfully, to this point, avoided the legislation that we put forward. It's narrowly been defeated in the second house both times after tinkering in legislative hearings and lots of side runs and everything else. And the men and women in uniform are tired of it, understandably. And all over the state, I talk about these issues. The public is tired of it too. They recognize there's not transparency there. And when they hear about the fraction of a sentence that a judge passes who is accountable, and then some bureaucrat puts into motion a process that means an unaccountable release, it's troubling to people. I'm evolving our proposal because when the legislature says no on something, on some matters, you got to take that. It's pretty clear to me that there is not an appetite for making longer sentences
So
or
let's
more
drill down on that.
mandatories. And so we've taken those away. Those away.
So we have a new legislative session coming up. Let me ask you
Yeah.
that question. How
Yep.
is what you're going to pursue in the upcoming session going to be different from what you've pursued in the past in terms of truth in sentencing?
Great question. There are zero mandatory sentences in there. There are zero extension of existing sentences in state statute. What it's going to provide to people, and this is going to become, there's several proposals floating around. There's some legislators that have come to us with ideas, and some I more or less agree with or not. It'll come out of it. It'll be legislators pushing these ideas. Law enforcement is very engaged across the state. And what you're going to find is this proposal, it should be called the system you thought you had. It's the system you thought you had. It's like Minnesota. When somebody gets sentenced in Minnesota, and ours is just going to be violent offenses, sexual offenses, and drug trafficking. Minnesota is every kind of crime. When you get sentenced to incarceration, you stay incarcerated in Minnesota for 2/3 of that sentence, the sentence that the co-equal branch of government gave you. You serve 2/3 of that before you're eligible for parole. That's the system. Everybody that I talk to in the state public, they think they have that. It's not even close. And when they're made aware of what they have, they don't support the system that we have right now. So it's putting daylight on it, and it's giving people the system that they thought that they had. And you will avoid whole swaths of crimes being committed by repeat offenders that are going out and offending over and over and over after being early released. Those are the most damnable offenses that I can think of. The ones where you got a victim of a crime when someone wasn't even supposed to be out of jail yet, according to the co-equal branch of government that has the constitutional responsibility to sentence them. I'm sorry, that's not a moral system.
Just to summarize, you're not looking to say a simple assault is X number of years longer or anything like that. What you're saying is the current penalties that are in law will stay. You're looking for some sort of a legislative restriction or narrowing of DOCR's ability to release people before the sentence is up. That's like good behavior, things like that.
Right.
That's what you're
well, you'd
looking
still
to
get that. You could still every system. The federal system has an 85% threshold. You can still earn 15% of good time through your conduct while you're incarcerated. And that seems wise. I think policymakers all across the country recognize there's wisdom in that to do the best you can to secure appropriate behavior for those who are incarcerated. And so that would be, and that's going to be a legislative decision. Like, what is that threshold? Some states, like Minnesota, I mentioned, does 66%. Federally, it's 85%. A lot of states have 75%. That will be an interesting discussion. But what we're not going to do this time is it's not going to be what you described as a food fight or looking to go off in whole new directions that it just seems the legislature doesn't want to do. But it is a fortifying the system that we have. The legislature has set the range for penalties. We're not seeking to adjust those at all. The judges have the responsibility of passing a sentence based on all the facts in that case, the criminal history of the defendant in front of them, the arguments of counsel on both sides of that courtroom, and that's going to be given the effect of law, which is weird. That's what people think happens. Victims stand there in court. Some person gets raped. This guy gets sentenced to 15 years. And the truth of the matter is, in North Dakota, they routinely walk out after serving a fraction of that sentence, and there's nothing the victim can do about it. Not one thing. So and we've got volumes. There was a member in the committee. You should go watch this hearing, by the way, recently. There was a member of that committee that looked at the prosecutor that was testifying in the face after he laid out that in one time period that he was able to extract the information from DOCR, and it wasn't easy. He got all this information he went through. He found 60 cases, not 6, which would be too many, not 16, which would be dramatically too many, 60 cases, serious felony convictions where the person was sentenced to a term of imprisonment by a judge, 0 days in jail, under how DOCR handled those cases. Abominable. That is unacceptable. That endangers the public. It's a slap in the face to victims and to law enforcement who's working on this. Those are the kind of things. And this person had the audacity to say, well, that's not, percentage-wise, that's not that many cases. The laws of this country changed dramatically in many states, including North Dakota and Minnesota, because of one case, Drew Shadeen being kidnapped, raped, and murdered viciously by a 3 times convicted sex offender who walked off, by the way, his entire sentence in Minnesota.
Drew, you've brought up Minnesota 3 or 4 times. And first of all, I love the fact that you want us to be more like Minnesota. I think that's a good thing.
I don't.
A lot of things.
I don't.
But let me make my point. That was a joke.
I love Minnesota as a state. I know.
That was a joke.
I know.
I don't talk to a lot of people in North Dakota who feel unsafe. Like literally, when I hear people say they don't feel safe, it's often when they're in the Twin Cities. Yeah. So like, I think you're trying to convince the citizens of North Dakota. I mean, do you think that North Dakotans should feel safe? Because I think we do feel safe. And then we hear this kind of thing and it feels like a bit of a scare tactic because frankly, I think North Dakotans feel safe. It's a safe place. They feel safe in the streets, no matter if it's downtown Fargo or on a farm in Bowman. We're a really safe place. And I feel like we're trying to create fear that doesn't exist.
No, I reject that out of hand. Okay. I've spent my entire career trying to bring justice in individual cases with the hope of some sort of a deterrent so that you can impact communities and you can and do. But I spent, it's interesting. I spent 10 years as the United States Attorney in North Dakota. Everybody knows the sentences are longer and that they have to get served in the federal system. And what did law enforcement bring to us routinely? And what did the public call out for routinely is when there were the more serious a case, or if they got their attention on it, or if there was some sort of a pod of activity taking place somewhere in the state, the calls were to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Calls were to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Please address this. With what? Oh, you want certainty? You want a crime? When they get convicted, they're going to get a certain sentence and they're going to serve it. Yeah, understandably. So that's real. And the other thing is, George W. Bush doesn't get quoted a lot, but he turned 80 years old yesterday, so we'll quote him. He would meet with the U.S. attorneys routinely. And they were great meetings, actually. And there was always a little bit of humor, but also some serious points going across. He talked about all sorts of things. Things he asked us to always keep in mind, and I kept it in mind anyway from my earliest days as a prosecutor. But he said, whatever the crime rate in your state or in your city for the person who's a victim of crime, the crime rate's 100%.
Right.
And I know, I bet the three of us agree on that. And so I'm not trying to instill anything in people that these statistics don't instill themselves. People feel this all across the state. I'm glad that the people that you're talking with say they don't feel unsafe. But I talk with a lot of people, victims of crime, people involved in the criminal justice system, people in law enforcement, who will tell you a very different message. And they'll talk about the people who do serious crimes, get sent away to DOCR, get released dramatically early, recommit again, and are running roughshod over the swath of people that they come into contact with.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
both
I
these
worry.
things can be true.
Certainly law enforcement's perspective is close, but the group of people you just mentioned, I mean, prosecutors, law enforcement, and victims of crime,
Victims.
to that George W. Bush quote you just related to us, if you're a victim of crime, the crime rate's 100%. These are all people who are very, very close to the issue. Do you think they might be too close and maybe not
I think
see the forest for the trees? Because if you're a cop, you're a hammer and everything looks like a nail. I mean, I don't blame them for having that perspective, but it's an important perspective. It's also not the only perspective.
Well, this is what the legislature is going to have to wrestle with. They're going to have to decide for themselves whether that legislator who decided that 60 felony serious convictions where they were sentenced to jail or spent 0 time in jail, whether that's an okay system that allows that, or whether they want to look at the people, 4,000 more every year than was the case a decade ago, 4,000 more across North Dakota for whom the crime rate is 100%. Who do they want to? What do they want to look at? They're going to have to decide, because I'm going to square this issue up. I already am. Everywhere that I go, I talk about it wherever I go. And I think a lot of people tease me about this. They're like, "Oh, that's where I start joking." I'm like, "Yeah, I did. I surrendered on mandatory minimums because there's something at the core of this that is so central to the criminal justice system. And when you have a DOCR that not only does these policies, pushes them to the nth degree, numbers of legislators that had no eyes on this and not through their own fault because of the communication that came to them from the professionals. When you have a system like that, you do have a system where things can flourish in the dark. They're not known and seen to people. And we're not going to stop until people have a real sense of the actual facts. And then also realize, watch their policymakers make choices. Make choices, policymakers. Do you want to say that judges' sentences should be respected? Because the AG is not calling for, judges should give longer sentences. I tell people all the time, this isn't a judge problem. I was asked the question the other day, well, is it a prosecutor problem? I'm like, no, prosecutors are asking for what they believe to be appropriate sentences in the cases. I'm not suggesting that they should ask for longer sentences or anything else. I'm saying that when a sentence gets passed, it's a pretty sacred part of this, of each individual case, and it ought to be served to a point of certainty, like it is in a vast majority of states across the country. And we ought to recognize with the national experts, including the gentleman who was handpicked by Barack Obama to be the leader of the Bureau of Justice Statistics, who has reviewed all these policies in North Dakota. I haven't talked to him intentionally because I never want people to say, oh gosh, Drew got in that guy's ear and Drew is so persuasive. The guy couldn't help himself. He threw out his whole life and career. No, I haven't even spoken to him directly. Others have. He's reviewed all of this and he's left it concluding, don't they know this stuff has been discredited everywhere in the country? These things like all these fancy names that they have for this stuff. They said this doesn't work anywhere.
True.
And it's time we live up to that, and that we look out for those 4,000 extra victims, not to mention the others, and we start having a system that's got more deterrence, more incapacitation, meaning you can't commit crimes while you're incarcerated for as long as the judge said you should be. And you still have an incentive to conduct yourself well in prison, but it gets set at a place where legislators and everybody knows you'll serve the sentences that were deemed to be fair after your plea bargain or after you were convicted of.
Drew, you just did air quotes when you said professionals when referring to the people who work at Department of Corrections.
I did, intentionally.
Obviously, that means you don't think they're professionals. There's a lot of people that work for Department of Corrections, really, really hardworking people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at some point, like those kind of comments, how do we move the ball forward when the Attorney General is like taking shots at the people working in Department of Corrections? It just doesn't seem like a good way to move public policy. It's almost name calling from my
I'm glad
perspective.
you asked. I'm glad you asked that because I should clarify that. I'm not saying that they're not professional. And I'm not saying that they don't have professional capacities and things that they can do well. But another thing that's been discredited all over the United States, including the United States itself and its own system, is the capacity for human beings sitting on parole boards and all these things. It's why they've been done away with in many states. They were done away with federally because there was no provable, discernible capacity to make judgments about who's likely to recidivate. And that's what I meant when I said, and I'm legitimately glad you asked the question, because I'm saying they have no proven capacity for the power that they've grabbed. None. And that's true. It's not just their fault. It's all across the United States. People are talking about doing away with parole boards. They are doing away with parole boards, and nationally it's been done away with. And the Democrats and Republicans are in consensus on that. We've had Democrat and Republican Senate presidents and Congresses since that was done in the 80s, and no one has proposed that we go back to a system of just sort of indeterminate, oh, well, whatever, we'll let the people at the prison figure it out. That's just never been what happens. And that's not a system with checks and balances. So, Chad, I'm glad you asked that question because there are obviously professionals out there, and they're folks that they're professional in their lane. But I happen to be a professional, but I can't do a tonsillectomy tomorrow. And they have shown no capacity to deal with recidivism, and also it's not their job. It's not their check and balance system constitutional responsibility. They are the executive branch. They are to carry out the sentence that the judicial branch gave them. That's to be carried out by the executive branch, not altered as it is day one when they walk in that prison. The first thing they do is go through this assessment that they've denied publicly doing. We now know it. We have it in black and white in paper that they absolutely do it. They walk in. The first thing they do is they figure out, like, well, now how long is this fellow going to be here? And then when are we going to get him up in front of the parole board? And then what information are we going to give them? And as we go through this more up ahead, people will see that this proposal really it's a totally different thing. And it is give the people the system they think that they have now, and which has some accountability and transparency.
Drew, I appreciate your time. It's not going to surprise you that I disagree with you on a lot of this. I think it's a good crime report. I think we can agree on that much. But I really appreciate you taking the time, sitting down in the airport and talking to us and making time for us for this discussion. I think it was really helpful.
No, it's good. I appreciate it too. And I think there's more to be discussed up ahead, including the materials that we've put together over the last couple of years. I give tremendous credit to the Burleigh County State's Attorney's Office. Dennis Ingold is the top assistant state's attorney down there, and is a very able paralegal, Bailey Vetter. They've worked assiduously to get this material together, and it's from all over the state, by the way. It's not just Burleigh County. These are all matters of public record and will be, and I'll look forward to getting them to all sorts of folks in policymaking and news and everywhere else, and then do what we've done for the last couple of years. We do the same thing every time. Tell us where that's inaccurate. Oddly enough, the only time they'll ever do that is when we're not in the room to counter it. I've made a request to have a meeting, to engage with them, to have sort of a neutral arbiter, if you will, present to watch how this discussion takes place, and then see them address those issues in our presence, not out of our presence, where they can say things like, what the AG really doesn't see is the following 5 things. They never say that when I'm present. They never say that when we are there and can have a discussion back and forth. And they've never given me back our written materials with any red markings on them, saying, gosh, this is inaccurate. And that's
this debate's
really an
obviously
important piece.
This debate's obviously going to keep going, but we got to wrap this interview up. Thank you so much, Drew. Certainly appreciate it.
Thanks to you fellows and your listeners. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Megan Invick with Americans for Prosperity, North Dakota. One of the cornerstones of our Road to Opportunity agenda is tax relief, because North Dakotans deserve to keep more of what they earn. That's why we're advocating for the elimination of the state income tax, along with meaningful property tax relief tied to responsible local spending. Learn more about the Road to Opportunity and our plan to eliminate the state income tax at afpnd.org.
This episode is presented by Recovery Centers of Montana. What would you say to someone listening right now who knows they need help but is scared to take that first step?
Just to reach out, because you never know who's willing to be in your corner, who's willing to care, and the world will surprise you sometimes.
Learn more by calling 701-401-3000.
That's 701-401-3000.
Hey, Plain Talk listeners, have something to say? Call or text Plain Talk with your questions, comments, or headlines you want us to cover.
Just dial 701-587-3141. Leave us your message or shoot us a text with your name and location, and you could be featured on an upcoming show.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I am in Jamestown.
Hey, Rob and Chad. My name is Tony. I live in Grand Forks.
That's 701-587-3141.
Call us, text us, vent, praise.
We want you in the conversation. Thanks for being part of the show.
Now let's get back to today's episode.
Chad, I got to tell you, this issue leaves me so confused. Ideologically, obviously there's the issue. There's the crime report that came out. I think it's good data. I think it generally shows a state that's getting safer. And honestly, one of the problems in talking about crime rates is that right in the middle of the last decade of data, we had a flippin' pandemic, which did some very weird things to our crime statistics. Group B crimes, which are like property crimes and things like that, those actually went down during the pandemic, which makes sense. Wow. It's hard to do things like vandalism and stuff when everybody's quarantined. But like violent crimes went up. You would expect that. Everybody was trapped at home. We all know we saw increases in domestic violence. So we're trying to talk about these long-term trends with a black swan event in the middle of it. And then our Attorney General, setting aside the question, I don't think the truth in sentencing stuff will help. I'm opposed to it. I'm having trouble seeing the distinction between mandatory minimums and what he's proposing. It still sounds like a mandatory thing, and it gives us less flexibility for how to treat offenders, which I don't necessarily support. But even setting that aside, the politics of it. The berating and attacking of the DOCR while simultaneously saying, we're going to work with the legislature. We're going to work with the governor's office. Well, the DOCR is part of the executive branch. The head of the DOCR is part of Governor Armstrong's cabinet. And so, if you really feel this way, that they're misleading people and they're doing all these nefarious things, then we've got a much bigger problem than a policy debate.
Right. I think in addition to COVID, the other thing we have to take into consideration, we're not that far removed from the Bakken boom either, right? That was probably on the front end of all of this stuff. So when we're talking about...
that's a great unspoken thing.
Right.
The Bakken boom made North Dakota a lot younger. You know who commits more crime?
Younger people. Right.
It also made us more male. Guess who commits more crime? Young males.
And the population growth and us not... there's just a lot of things, again, to look at this stuff. But I think you put your finger on the pulse of the most important takeaway from that interview. Nothing has changed in terms of the Attorney General's feelings about the Department of Corrections, and he can't help himself to not attack them, to question their professionalism, to go after them again and again and again. And I got to be honest, the policy discussion gets lost on me. We are having this, I think it's an important conversation to have when Drew goes after the Department of Corrections. And, it's sort of like one thing after another, and they're liars over here, and they're liars here, and they're whatever. The policy gets lost. You can't track sort of what we're trying to accomplish here because of the attacks on the Department of Corrections. Everybody wants the same thing, right? I also think North Dakota is a safe place. This report reinforces North Dakota is a safe place. To hear him talk, it's like everybody walking down the street should be nervous about their well-being. That's not the reality of what people are feeling.
I think you can drill down to like simple assaults, aggravated assaults. They are up. Right. But I don't know when I think about crimes like that. I don't know that they're the sort of crimes that deterrents work on. An aggravated assault is like a bad bar fight, right?
Right.
If somebody's drunk and seeing red in a bar, are they going to stop and say, "Oh, I better not do this because I'll get a tougher sentence"?
Now, is there a connection?
Or I won't get a tougher sentence. The sentence I get, I'll be forced to serve 85% of it, or whatever it is. That I just don't think it works that way. I think there's probably other factors about why people are doing this. And look at our culture right now. Look at what's happening online. Look at what's happening in our politics. Look what's happening in our grocery stores and people losing their minds. I think there's other cultural issues at play here that really don't have anything to do with sentencing policy.
But Rob, is there a connection between those increases in DUIs and the increase of simple assaults? Those often I think are alcohol and fueled, right? Yeah. Is it a drinking issue that we should, again, I think these are complicated things. Why are DUIs up? to his credit, he said, I don't know. I wish I knew the answer to that, which you don't hear
That's
often
fair.
from politicians. But I would like us to dig a little bit deeper into the why that's happening.
And what's the geography too? Can we pay? And I want to say that I haven't looked into that specifically, but can we pay? I mean, is there a problem in Minot but not Bismarck? Like maybe there's something specific to Minot that we need to be doing better, or Ward County, or Cass County, or wherever it is.
Going back to Bakken, if we have more younger males in the state now, who's out drinking and, you know, getting in bar fight, like there, to dive a little bit deeper into this is really, really important. But again, it just felt like we're doing the same thing we did 2 years ago. And Drew might be able to say it's different. It's a different policy, but that policy distinction is going to get lost if it's just these guys over at and to your point, if they are these incompetent, evil folks, then they shouldn't be here. But I don't get the sense from a lot of folks in this world that they agree with Drew that the people at DOC are bad people.
Well, listen, and this is such an awkward thing because our governor and our attorney general, I know, talk to each other all the time, you know, for work reasons, for personal reasons. They know each other well. They've known each other for years. We are now years into this campaign from the attorney general against at least the leadership at DOCR, where all the things he says, that they're duplicitous, that they're misleading people, that they're doing all these things. There's got to come a point. And I feel like the governor's made the point already. And I don't want to make this sound like I've talked to him or I know something. I'm not. This is just as I'm observing this is just me talking. But I think the governor sent a message where he has not made any changes in leadership at DOCR. B, I think there may come a point where if this continues, maybe the governor needs to come out and say, there's not going to be any changes at DOCR. I am comfortable with things the way they are. I am comfortable with this. This stuff about DOCR being dishonest or whatever needs to come off the table. You know, there's a difference between being dishonest and just disagreeing because people do that way too often, where you make an argument you don't like it, say, oh, you're lying or you're whatever. You know, DOCR is allowed to make a counter argument and in support of the policies that they're making. And presumably when they're making that argument, it represents the governor's position because that's his cabinet member. Right. That's his agency that's doing that.
And if the head of Department of Corrections was down making an argument that the governor did not agree with, the governor would fire him. Right. And so that would have happened by now.
Yeah. If the DOCR was like off the rails, making wild claims or whatever that the governor didn't agree with, you announce so-and-so is going to go spend more time with their family. Yep. And I'm making a new cabinet appointment.
I also just, and I made this case a year ago or 6 months ago when the last report came out. I don't understand an attorney general not making political hay from the fact that he has led the charge to reduce crime in North Dakota. Most attorney generals, I think, would be saying that if the crime rate is down. Like most attorney generals like when it's down, but because of this policy, and I'm going to keep saying food fight until I see something different, it's like there's spinning going on with these staff to try to pass the policy rather than, crime's down. That's a good thing. We should be happy. And let me ask you this, Rob. Do you talk to people who feel unsafe in North Dakota?
Not really. No, I say that. Obviously, there's a debate in Fargo about some of the stuff that's going on down south. So do I hear sometimes like very localized concerns about certain parts of a given city or a state? Yes. Sometimes.
Do I feel unsafe walking around downtown Fargo at 2 a.m? Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't know. I don't spend enough time in downtown Fargo. I don't feel unsafe walking around. I would not that I have recently, but I wouldn't feel unsafe at 2 a.m. in downtown Minot. I don't know that I'd really feel that unsafe at 2 a.m. anywhere in Minot.
Right.
That's where I'm saying that's where I live.
And it's where
we're gonna have the state fair, and I know all sorts of people who are gonna let their kids go out, their high schoolers or young adults go out to the fair, and they're going to be out there for a long time. And don't get me wrong, it's going to every fair we get some yahoos.
There's some debauchery.
There's some dumb stuff, but for the most part, it's going to be just like it's been for the last 40 years. I don't feel like, and the thing is, I feel like the report shows that, again, I think a lot of when we're looking at some of these trends, you got to ask yourself, if you're comparing to like a 2000 to or excuse me, 2020, 2021, 2022, even 2023 number, that's pandemic era. I think it's really hard to look at a lot of this stuff. And again, there are so many variables that go into why crimes get committed. I mean, crime in general is so multifaceted. I mean, you have sex crimes that are motivated by sex. You have financial crimes that are often motivated by poverty or greed. You have, assaults, which sometimes can be motivated by somebody just got drunk. Maybe they're the nicest person in the world, but when they drink, they're a violent son of a gun.
Yeah,
sometimes they're motivated by mental health issues or domestic issues. I mean, it's so complicated, and to come out and to say this sentencing change is going to change all of this. Yeah, if we did, I mean, if we could run a test and implement it for 5 years, I don't think that we would see a meaningful change in crime. And some of the stuff we says where it's never worked anywhere, we have implemented truth in sentencing policies in other states in the country. It hasn't really made a meaningful impact. I don't know that you can really point to a place where this has made what the Attorney General is proposing is has changed things.
I also am not sure, pointing to Minnesota multiple times and saying we should be more like Minnesota in terms of people fulfilling their sentences. Is that compelling to the people that he wants to move? I also don't think having a former Barack Obama appointee saying the Department of Corrections is full of it is all that helpful in terms of, again, getting the majority of the votes in the legislature. I feel like there should be a way to get to a good place here, because ultimately we all want the crime rate to go down. We don't want people getting out early if they're going to conduct other crimes, but we also know 95% of people who go into prison come back out. So
I like Drew Wrigley a lot, and I think his heart is 1,000% in the right place on this issue.
Yep.
And he has a long track record as U.S. attorney. He worked as a prosecutor in Pennsylvania for a while. I mean, he's been involved with this stuff for a long time. I worry that I thought one of the most telling moments of that interview is when he talks about the people he's talking to. He's talking to cops. He's talking to prosecutors. He's talking to crime victims. And again, those are important perspectives. I am not belittling those perspectives. I'm not diminishing them at all. But that's not the whole picture. That's not the only perspective. I thought his George W. Bush quote was apt. Yeah, of course, if you're a crime victim, you're going to think crime's a big problem. And if you're not a crime victim and it hasn't happened to you, then you're not. And maybe that's your and I's perspective. We haven't had crime happen to us.
Yeah.
So, right? I mean, the biggest crime was the Twins sweeping the Yankees in the Bronx. That's the biggest crime.
Yeah, it felt a little self-inflicted though on behalf of the Yankees. But no, but I agree with the George W. Bush quote. I mean, that's exactly right. Things don't feel safe if you've been a victim of one of these crimes. And all of, I mean, it could happen to any of us, right? I mean, it's part of living in a society that there is going to be some stuff that could happen, unless you're just going to be a hermit off by yourself.
Sure.
But if we're going to use data to make decisions, we got to make sure that we're really being honest about it. Because Drew he's so passionate, right? He wants this to happen. And I just hope he's not blinded by just talking to the people in his bubble who agree with him, and that he's willing to maybe talk to people outside the bubble a little bit about the best solutions here. You and I know the people who work on these issues at the state. I mean, Jonathan Holt, the people at Department of Corrections, folks, and it's no wonder the governor's a defense attorney. He's going to have a different perspective than the prosecutor, attorney general on this stuff. But these are all really, really good people. And I just feel like if we would just tone it down and maybe chill with the insults a little bit, that we could get a little bit further in this conversation.
That's the thing I don't understand is that I don't understand how the attorney general is isolating his just very, very strong criticism. And even that's underselling it, like his just vociferous criticism of the DOCR, how he separates that from the governor, who would ultimately need to sign this legislation, into law. I don't think it's helpful. I mean, I think he'd be better off just understanding that the DOCR is going to make, and really when I say the DOCR, the Armstrong administration is going to be making a different argument, and he disagrees with it. And the fact that there's disagreement is not evidence of dishonesty or unprofessionalism. And I realize he kind of corrected the unprofessionalism thing there at the end. I guess I appreciate that. I thought the air quotes he did. For those of you who watch the video, if you're listening to the audio version of this, but I just thought that was unnecessary. And a lot of this stuff, this debate is hard enough without some of that stuff.
Well, and again, we should not be surprised that there's disagreements on this. Like, we should not be surprised. This is a complicated, we're taking away people's freedoms, right? We also want to make sure citizens are kept safe. We want to make sure the people that we are taking away their freedoms, when they get out, they're able to participate in society. These are complicated things. We can't have complicated conversations if one side of the table and the other side of the table are just saying, hey, that other guy sucks.
And by the way, the other really tough thing about this that we can't ignore is there's a cost. And I know people don't want to hear that when it comes to public safety, but there's a cost benefit thing. If we keep people in jail longer, jail or prison, whatever we're talking about, there's a cost to that. I don't know people understand our prisons in this state, our jails in this state are already bursting. Now, I know we've made some reforms. We've done some things to kind of alleviate some of the tension, but that problem's not gone. You start keeping people in jail longer, and to hear the Attorney General talk about it, we're talking about thousands of people. There's only a couple of thousand people in jail in North Dakota right now.
And it's a lot.
I mean, that is a dramatic increase to the taxpayers. That when legislators are considering this issue, like it or not, that's one of the things they have to. What's the cost benefit of this?
Right. And we want to make sure. It's a lot cheaper to give prisoners the rehabilitation they need so they don't come back when they get let out. Right. I mean, I think that's an important investment that we need to do. And so just locking folks up and then letting them go after they've done the 100% of their term is not a good process.
And what he's pushing for is 85%. He wants at the minimum, like no good time or anything until 85% of a sentence is done. I think that's
every case is different, right? I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, we want follow whatever the judge says. And I agree. We've got 3 branches of government. See, I could pass that civics test. I know there's 3 branches of government, but every person, like if somebody's in prison because of an addiction issue and they've gotten a handle on addiction and they're able to get out and again, get a job, pay taxes, be with their family, whatever, we should want that. And just to have a law in the books that says, nope, you got to be there for 85 or 100% of the time really takes away some flexibility. Again, I'm never going to be an expert on this, but we have to have better conversations than we're having right now.
I agree. And really, because again, I don't think that the Attorney General was wrong about everything and identifying the problems. I think you can go through, this is a good crime report. I trust the data in this crime report. I think it was well done. And I do think that there are some areas. So I think we can ask, why are there so many more simple assaults and aggravated assaults? I don't think that sentencing is the panacea. So I guess we'll see.
And again, I go back, are we arresting more people? Are we getting better at identifying this? Are more people pressing charges after they get punched at a bar? We just don't know the answers to that.
Yeah. So, well, we're going to put a pin in it there. Thank you so much for listening / watching, depending on how you're joining in. Remember, you can always visit us at plaintalknd.com. That goes to our YouTube page. There's clips from the show. There's the versions of the show that we put on television, WDAY Extra. There's obviously the full episodes. There's the interview. It's a great way to follow the show. If you go there, hit subscribe. You can watch on your phone. You can watch on your TV. YouTube's so great. You can also, of course, find us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, X. Plain Talk ND is the way to find us on all of those platforms. Also, don't forget, you can call and leave us a text message, leave us a voicemail, 701-587-3141. Add us to your contacts. So if you're listening or you're watching the show and you see something you want to react to or send us a note or whatever, you can text it. You can leave us a voicemail. We absolutely love getting those. And more than likely, you will end up on the show. And that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk again. That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. 3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening.
There's some debauchery.
This episode is presented by the Blue Rider.
Check out the Blue Rider in downtown Minot for a laid-back vibe and outdoor patio and 16 beers on tap.
They've got live music, trivia nights, and one of the deepest record collections around.
Plus fair prices, friendly faces, late-night favorites like grilled cheese and pizza.
The Blue Rider, serving Minot since 1994.
Good drinks, good music, good people.
The North Dakota oil and natural gas industry works here, and works here, and here, and even works here, by creating 60,000 jobs statewide and generating billions of tax dollars annually to support our infrastructure, flood protection projects, and our schools. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities.
Learn more at ndpetroleumfoundation.org.
This episode is presented by Recovery Centers of Montana. What would you say to someone listening right now who knows they need help but is scared to take that first step?
Just to reach out, because you never know who's willing to be in your corner, who's willing to care. And the world will surprise you sometimes.
Learn more by calling 701-401-3000.
That's 701-401-3000.